What's up, guys? Welcome to season two, episode four of the Rattling the Brand podcast. It is my honor to introduce our guest today. We have David Amber on the podcast. He is a Canadian sports broadcaster and television personality. He covers hockey. He's a host and a commentator for NHL related programming. He was with NHL on Sportsnet and Hockey Night in Canada. If you watch hockey, you like sports, you'll see this guy on your television before most games. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey Aaron, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. So, just starting off with your career and stuff, growing up, were you a big sports fan? Did you watch sports? Did you play sports? What was your interaction with sports at a young age?
Yeah, of course. Probably like you, really enthusiastic, passionate about a lot of sports. Watched a ton of hockey. Back, I'm a little bit older, so it used to be 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. Hockey night in Canada was just one game. So you'd have the anticipation, sort of waiting all week to get to Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday. Wednesdays, the Leafs would have, I grew up in Toronto, the Leafs would have a lot of games on Wednesdays. So those were my favorite days of the week because you'd have that anticipation of watching the NHL. But in the summer as well, I'd watch a lot of Blue Jays games and baseball and yeah, fondly, CFL, the NBA as well. NBA was harder to find back in the day, but I was a huge Dr. J fan, so I definitely was an NBA fan as well. So I watched a lot, NFL as well. So I'm really passionate about sports since I was a little guy.
I love it. So, reading up on you, I saw your dad was a journalist. Did that kind of help you get into the profession of sports broadcasting, or was that something you kind of ventured to on your own?
Yeah, no, it definitely gave me exposure to television. He didn't work in sports specific. He was actually an executive producer at CBC
Oh,
in
very cool.
news. So he did news specials. He did like the royal wedding and the Pope visits and all sorts of election coverage. And he did cover the Olympics as well. So he did do a bit of sports. And I actually, once in a while, I'd go into his work and I'd see what he was doing, putting these shows together. And it was really exciting. The live television, aspect was something that definitely caught my eye. And then when I got a bit older and I was off at university, and I said, I kind of want to get into television, but I certainly want to be in sports, not news. News was just too much for me. It was too serious, and sports was I had more of a passion for, and it was just an escape, if nothing else. So he gave me that exposure to the industry, and I always had the interest in sports, so I sort of just combined the two and started to run with it. And I was very lucky, just fortunate to get the timing that I had and get the opportunities I've been given.
So, in your early life, you went to McGill. After McGill, what were your early experiences in broadcasting? How did you kind of start out in the industry?
Well, Aaron, I'm sure you're finding this too. You're a student right now, right at TMU, and it's tough. It's a tough path. So I was at McGill and I was writing for their school paper, and I was, I was on their school radio station. I was trying to do as much as I could by my like third year when I decided I wanted to get into sports broadcasting. But they didn't, I didn't, I was just getting sort of your general arts degree, history, economics, poli sci type degree. It had nothing to do with media, had nothing to do with sports, had nothing to do with journalism. So I went back to school and I went to Syracuse University, and they had a specific broadcast journalism program. And the reason I chose Syracuse is at the time there was just so few options in Canada. And they had put a lot of guys out into the business, a lot of guys I watched on TV, the Bob Costases and Mike Tirico and Steve Croft, so, at 60 Minutes, and Ted Koppel and a bunch of really big name broadcasters. So I thought, oh, well, this obviously must be a good sort of training ground. And it was very practical. We put on news reports, and we would, put on studio shows, and we, basically graduated there with a resume tape. And I thought, all right, well, great. I have this fancy degree from Syracuse. I got this resume tape, even though it was quite raw. I felt like, all right, I'm going to get a job. And then I was just shooting out tapes in these little introductory markets in the U.S.: Bangor, Maine, Joplin, Missouri, Jackson, Mississippi, Redding, California. I mean, North Platte, Nebraska. These tiny, tiny markets. Rejection, 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 rejection. A lot of rejection. So I was back home, and I was going, oh man, I don't know if I'll ever get a job. And then I was very lucky to drive around Ontario and basically handing out resume tapes to the people that would agree to meet with me. And met with one man, Mark Oldfield, out in Sudbury, and he basically said, "Yeah, we don't have anything for you, but I will shoot your tape around to some of our sister networks." And eventually, long story short, or it's already a long story, but Sault Ste. Marie had an opening. I drove out to Sault Ste. Marie and had an audition, and it went well, and I was offered the job, and was my first sort of step on the broadcast journalism ladder.
That was at the time Joe Thornton was there, right?
It was.
correct? That's very cool.
Yeah.
So kind of being around people in the industry and kind of gaining that firsthand experience, what would you say is the biggest thing you took away at the time that kind of helped you in your career right now?
From that first job in Sault Ste. Marie?
Yeah, what was the first thing that kind of took away and you still have with you to this day?
Wow, I'm trying to think. I mean, first of all, I learned a ton there. It was a great learning experience. I did news, weather, and sports. One thing I learned is when you get an opportunity, you have to jump at it.
Yeah,
I didn't want to go to news. I wanted to go into sports, but they said, come out we're hiring you to do news and we'll see how it goes. And if there's opportunities for you to jump in and do some sports, we'll allow you to do that. And I think that's something I just learned is when you get an opportunity, even if you're not perfectly, gauged towards it, or you don't feel you have all the preparation in place, do everything you can, even if you're a bit uncomfortable, to try and make that work. And people, I think, will respect the work ethic and the fact that you have that level of ambition and passion towards it. That was something I learned. Probably the other thing I learned, and I even learned this back at Syracuse, it's a collaboration.
yeah,
I think the people who are the most successful and are the best respected in this industry don't have this big ego and say, well, this show is about me, especially if you're an on-air person where you're the one who gets the accolades, you're the one who's sort of the face of what's happening. But it's a collaboration with your producer, with the editors, with your camera person, with your audio people. You're working together. And if your audio person's messing up, you're not going to be presenting the way you want to present. If your camera person, you're all out of focus or whatever, if your producer is not helping you along. So it's a collaboration. And in Sault Ste. Marie, some days things worked really well. We were a well-oiled machine, and some days things weren't so great. And you didn't want to let your teammates down, and you didn't want them to let you down either. So that was something I always took with me from every job I've been at, is like, we're a team here. I'm excited to be part of this team. And I think we try and pull everyone up as best you can and work collectively on putting on the best show you can put on. So that's something I've always, from that very first, professional experience till now, I've sort of said that's important and don't lose sight of that.
I love it. Yeah, a lot of people in the industry, what they say is like you got to be proactive. You got to take every opportunity you can get, and you might like get a job doing news, you might get a job doing sports, and just whatever you can get, you got to take.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to talk to Elliot Freeman. Actually, he came to our school, and he was telling us he's like
Was he interesting? Was he good, Aaron, or what?
he was very good. He was very good. Super nice guy.
Good.
We were talking to him, and the one thing that really stood out to him that he said to me was the thing about live TV is everyone sees your best moments and everybody sees your worst moments. And every top
Mhm.
news personality and everyone who's been on live TV has those blunders that happen. Did you kind of have like a welcome to broadcasting moment, like a moment that you remember where you messed up or something didn't go your way and something that you still remember to this day?
I do. I'm trying to think about how I put this. So yeah, I was in Sault Ste. Marie and I was doing sports, and trying to be maybe more funny than I should have been. And I should have been maybe just keeping it pretty straightforward. And the news director, Tony Rima, called me in after one particular broadcast. I didn't say anything like way over the top by any means, but he saw that I was maybe trying a little too hard, and he kind of called me and was like, yeah, just tone that down a little bit. And I took the message to heart. I kind of like, yeah, you gotta be careful, because again, where people are welcoming us into their living rooms, and they're choosing to have us there, and they might be with their kids or whatever. You got to know the audience. You got to understand not everyone's sense of humor is the exact same, and you could say something that would be offensive to someone. You want to have fun, and you got to keep it light, but there are parameters, and I think that was a good early lesson for me. The beauty of going out to a small market is you can make those types of mistakes and they're not career ending or limiting or anything like that. And I'm painting this like I said something. I didn't. It was light, I assure you. But it was one of those things where it was a good eye opener at an early stage in my career, just to go, okay, yeah, you always got to be mindful of being respectful about what you're saying. But yeah, that's the thing. And with social media, or as I like to call it, anti-social media on these phones, you make any mistake, as innocuous or as minor as it might seem. I mean, the shows are 3 hours, 3.5 hours long. Sometimes it's double headers. You're on the air for 7 hours. You're gonna mispronounce a name potentially. You're gonna slip up and use the wrong word in a sentence. You're gonna have a mistake. I've been in this long enough to know you just got to keep pushing through. And the reason I brought up social media is people will let you know if you wrong stat, wrong pronunciation, bad. If you have a bad take, God forbid, everyone on social media, you hate our team. You love that team, you hate our team, and you can get in the course of the same show, you're doing a Leafs Habs games, and the Habs people think you love the Leafs people think you love the Habs, and it's pretty funny. So we got a good kick out of that. You're not going to satisfy everyone, and I think that's something you just have to accept. It comes with the territory. It's overwhelmingly more positive than negative, but you do hear if you make mistakes, as Elliot says, your worst moments could be caught out there. And I think as long as you own them, and I try and do that. When I make a mistake, I'll be the first to say, hey, yeah, I misspoke there, or I had the wrong stat there, or I mispronounced that person's name. These things happen, and you move on. I think people, as long as you own it and accept it and show a level of accountability, they're willing to forgive and forget and move on.
Absolutely. So one thing I was wondering that I see, you see all these people on TV, right? All the broadcasters, all the sports people. You see them when the show starts, and then after the show's over, you don't see them. Can you kind of walk us through what a day before going on air looks like for you? So you got a show coming up at night for Saturday Night Hockey. What does your day look like from the minute you wake up to prep?
Yeah, so I just hosted last night,
Yep.
Scotiabank Wednesday Night Hockey, Leafs and Capitals. And on Monday, we have a production meeting and we go through with our producer, David Azuma, and all the on-air people, Jennifer Botterill, Luke Gastic, Sam Cosentino on a specific show, as well as our senior executives. We are going through what the storylines are. What are the key things we want to talk about? What are the best discussions? We don't have a teleprompter. It's not scripted, but there are ideas in these silos of, hey, let's talk about OV and his pursuit of Wayne Gretzky. Let's talk about the Leafs revamped defense. Let's talk about how great Mitch Marner is playing, despite the fact Austin Matthews isn't there. And then we kind of build the show around that. Tuesday, I'll be, I was actually working in studio as well on Tuesday, but I'm making game notes, or what are all the things about Washington? They've got out to this great start. It's not just OV, but Dylan Strome's playing well. Their goaltending's playing well. This head coach, Spencer Carberry. The one thing I would stress to you and to any, aspiring broadcaster, be as, absorb as much information as possible. Mm. And when people reach out, especially when I want to get into sports, I go, that's great. If you're a huge hockey fan, that's great. But you know what? That's that much of the industry.
Yeah.
If you know about soccer, if you know about golf, and if you know about tennis, and if you know about NFL and CFL, and I can just keep extending my arms out,
Yeah.
the more versatile you can be, the better off you'll be. I'm in a niche part of it right now, working exclusively with NHL, and it's great, but I better know everything about the NHL as much as I can. Simply because the viewers like you who are diehard fans, do you have a team you're a fan of?
I'm a huge Habs fan.
There you go. So you know everything. So you want to make sure that I know Demidov was taken 5th overall, and Reinbacher is coming back from that injury, and Line got hurt in the preseason. I better know all of this. I better know that Caulfield, could be the highest goal scorer in Montreal since Vinny Damphousse in '94. I better have a real finger on the pulse of what your team's all about. And you have to, take in as much information as possible. So for me, when you talk about the lead up to the show, two things. One, know what we're doing, know the show inside out, know the teams inside out, know the storylines inside out. And then secondly, quite frankly, as a host, to me, everything, Aaron, is about making the experts, letting them shine with their expertise. I can't talk about playing a game in the NHL. I've never played a game in the NHL. Luke Gastic's played hundreds of games in the NHL. I can toss it up to him in a way that allows him to shine and showcase his level of expertise. Jennifer Botterill's won every medal there is to win. She's in like 10 different Hall of Fames. I'm going to set her up to showcase what she knows, and Sam Cosentino with, all the junior, his draft rankings and the fact that he knows the OHL, CHL, all of it, NCAA, inside out, upside down, play to everyone's strengths. So to me, it's all about, all right, we're going to have a conversation about OV and his pursuit of the record. What's the most interesting way to get into that conversation and make these guys shine and allow them to be in an area of comfort and expertise for them? So that's what I've always sort of viewed the host role as, is you're a conduit to allow your colleagues to shine, and also just to present it in a way that people are comfortable bringing it into their living room, and they're happy, they're engaged, they're using it as a nice escape, and it's not too heavy and not too somber, and you're enthusiastic and you're pumped up to do it. So the days leading up is all about kind of absorbing the show, absorbing the information. I have this little dorky binder I do on NHL Yeah.
Love it.
The guys, but you know what? Elliot and Ron have these like incredible memories.
Mhm.
I'm sure Elliot, walked into your class and remembered everyone's name, like 30 kids or whatever. If I walked in there, I'd be like, oh God, like I would want you to be wearing name tags or something because I just can't absorb it all. But the binder I put together at the beginning of the year gives me a little bit of comfort just knowing I've got information on every team and what's going on around the league. And I just build on it as we go day by day throughout the season.
I love it. And that's one thing that I like to think about too, is that's one thing I've really realized. I got the opportunity to interview Ben Schulman, and he was telling me, he's a broadcaster for the Jays, he was telling me he only uses about 3% of his notes per game. And that's just the one thing that's really shocked me about the industry is the preparation that, these professionals have, and just being able to, like, if something goes off script, you're always a bit able to talk about something different. And that's one thing that's really shocked me about it. So it's good to hear that the preparation's up there.
Yeah, and Ben Schulman could learn from the best. His dad, Dan Schulman, it's funny, when I was in Sault Ste. Marie, so this was back in 1996, my first TV job, Dan Schulman came out to do a Greyhounds game. And it was funny because we brought a cake to him, not me personally, but the team brought a cake to him
Mhm.
because it was his 30, I think it was maybe his 30th birthday or 25th birthday. Whatever. No, it was his 30th birthday. He was celebrating in Sault Ste. Marie.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, this is amazing. And Dan, even back then, was a legend, and now he's just he and Ben. What a great legacy of broadcasting that family has.
So one question I had is a little bit about nerves, right? So I'm a second year sports media student. When I'm sideline reporting for TMU, I'm just kind of getting into it now. When I do my first sideline reporting, I'm shaking, I'm nervous. When I'm interviewing someone like you, I'm shaking, I'm nervous. Like it's something new to me. As you kind of get more into the industry, you have decades of experience. Do you still get those nerves before you go on live TV, especially because you're in front of probably 100 times more people than I'm ever in front of, and I still feel those nerves. Do you feel those nerves when you still step on the air?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I think that's the excitement of live TV. I wouldn't say every show I'm on, panic attack or anything like that, but certainly, you get pumped up. First show of the year, big meat matchups, the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Stanley Cup final. You're sitting rinkside and you're interviewing, Austin Matthews or whomever, and it's not that you're nervous, but you're like, you almost have to take a step back and kind of not be caught up in like, wow, this is pretty amazing. The 22-year-old me would be going, oh my God, you've interviewed Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan or whatever. Like, that's amazing. So yeah, I think though it's funny when I've done the amount of preparation I feel comfortable with, it puts me a little bit at ease.
Yeah.
I know it's not going to be a perfect interview or a perfect show, but I've done everything in my power to be ready for it to be as good as it can be. And then it gives me comfort. If I walk into a situation unprepared, I'm much less comfortable and I'll be probably a little bit more nervous or just feeling the weight of what I'm trying to do. But one thing I've done, and maybe this will work for you, Aaron, whenever I get a little rattled, I go, at the end of the day, we're sitting around talking about sports, talking about
Yeah.
hockey. Like, it's not life or death generally. My wife works in private equity and the stakes are very high and there's like $1 million deals going down and people are freaking out. And I go, wow, you've got an adult job. At the end of the day, I'm like, what happened on the Leafs power play? So it really keeps me grounded. And maybe that's just something I've told myself when it feels like this, like, oh wow, Stanley Cup final, we were getting 8 million people, 9 million people watching the Edmonton Oilers. It was a big night. But I was like, let's have fun with this. People are tuning in because this is fun. This is an escape. The
Absolutely.
stakes are high and there's a championship, but we're there to have fun with it. At the end of the day, it's an escape for people, and you can't lose sight of that. And it's not life or death. So I try to tell myself that when I'm getting a little too worked up.
I love it. One way that you find your own voice is a question I had because I see a lot, like the main thing, the big talk about our program is everybody on the air is so good. Everyone who's made it in the industry is so good. What's one piece of advice you can give to students looking to get into the industry to kind of find their own voice and excel?
Be authentic. By definition, is finding your own voice, but I don't think you should go and try and emulate, a broadcaster you look up to.
Mhm.
I've been lucky enough to work side by side with some legends, whether it's Ron McLean. I worked at TSN with some, Rod Smith, some very, very James Duthie, some very solid broadcasters. When I was at ESPN, I worked with some of the greatest broadcasters you could ever wish to be around. But I didn't want to sort of, if I walked out there trying to be Chris Berman, stumbling, grumbling, not and doing his thing, I can't be, that's not authentic me, and that's me trying to imitate someone else. And um, the best you can be, it sounds so cheesy, but the best you can be is you, because that's the authentic who you are. I don't try to emulate other people. I certainly try, maybe when it comes to preparation or style of interviewing, how you engage in questions with people. I worked with a reporter, he's now at Fox, but his name's Tom Rinaldi, and I watched him really closely. I just thought he was such a thorough, smart reporter, really engaging but respectful when he did his questions. And he did one of, you should go type in when you get a chance, Tom Rinaldi interviewing Tiger Woods. It was after the whole Tiger Woods scandal. He was told he has, I think it was 4 minutes. You have 4 minutes with Tiger Woods. That sounds like a lot of time, but based on he had just missed all this time, there was this huge scandal. He had the car accident, da 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 da. There's all these things that had happened to him. How do you fit all of that in? And he did it. He was like this, boom, 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 rattling off these great open-ended questions, bringing out as much. Tiger, was very much on point. It didn't give him a moment. He didn't start crying or anything like that, but it was so thoroughly well executed. And there's certain people in the industry. John Saunders was another guy. Just no one has a bad word to say about him, both as a colleague when I had a chance to work with him a little bit at ESPN, but also as a person outside of sports, and how he treated everyone. So I take my cues from those people and try and be the most authentic version of myself based on what I respect and like about others in the industry. And I think that's the best advice anyone could give, or can get, essentially, is to be you, and you'll do the best at being you as anyone can be, right?
I love it. In terms of being, being there for your family and also being there for the viewers who watch your show, how do you balance a family life and work? When you go home, do you take your work
Mm.
with you? Do you kind of put it to the side? What's that dynamic like for you, and how do you make it work?
That's an awesome question. And it's not always easy. I tell a lot of people who want to get into this industry, especially when they want to get into sports, when does sports happen? Nights, weekends, holidays. Um, my wife's has been very understanding, and she has a stressful job in her own right, but like Christmas vacations haven't happened as often as she would like. I have the summers off with my current job, but that wasn't always the case. Often when I was working at ESPN, I'd get a call, 2 in the afternoon. I'd be in the park with my two kids, pushing them on the swing. Brett Favre is going to unretire or get to Minnesota. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And it's like, boom. So balancing, I'm not answering your question, but I think you better be with a partner who's understanding of the commitment that it takes. Do I bring my work home? One of the things I really love about this job is whether the show is fantastic or the show isn't as great as I'd like it to be. The mistakes that were made and you want to correct them, but I'm not going to come home and be, sulking and stomping and screaming and yelling and upset. I can definitely compartmentalize my work life and my personal life. And I always would prioritize. I have two kids now, they're in university as well, but when they were young, I would do everything. I said to my kids, I'll be there for every last thing you do. Obviously, if I'm out of town and it's out of my control, I hope you can understand that. But I'll be honest with you, I got to see a lot of my kids' sports activities and extracurriculars and performances, because I did work at nights, and a lot of those things when they were younger certainly were in the day as well. And I would book my travel. My son had a hockey tournament in Buffalo, and I was working in Winnipeg on a Saturday night, and I took the 5 a.m. flight or whatever it was from Winnipeg to Toronto, and then drove to Buffalo to make sure I was there for the final of his tournament. So you got to make it, you got to find that balance. And that's a great question. And that's something that all of us, I think, struggle with. You better be with some pretty understanding people in your immediate family. And I think you can make it work. And it's worth it if you can find that balance, for sure.
I love it. So, besides hockey, right, you put so much of your time into hockey and sports. What are some other interests and hobbies that you like to engage in when you're not, at the rinks or in the studio?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I like to do. I didn't do as much of it as I like to this summer. I like golfing. I golf a lot with James Duffy over at TSN. He takes a lot of my money. We have a good laugh about it.
There you go.
But I do like getting out there and hitting the ball. I go to the gym a lot. I like going for bike rides. And the gym to me, it just clears my head. I've got a dog who's being noticeably quiet right now, which is nice, but you might hear her before this is over. I go on, I throw a podcast in. I don't even listen to sports podcasts. I listen to sort of news or pop culture podcasts. And I walk her, about 8K every day. Just a lot about just sort of time to contemplate and have that ability to decompress a little bit. So when I'm not sort of immersed in work, and work even does look like watching hockey games. I know it's funny, like people watch hockey games, but we're watching also with that critical eye of like, what are the storylines? How are the other networks presenting their shows? What do their shows look like? But those are the things I like to do. A lot of activity. I like to be a little bit on the go, and when the weather cooperates, bike rides, etc., and some good hikes and walks and golf do the trick usually.
I'm sure this last question is going to be a little bit tough for you, considering you probably have so many things that come to mind. But if you had to pick one thing that was your best moment
Mm.
in sports, in broadcasting, and anything, what would be the most memorable moment that you take away from your time here?
Well, I've been extraordinarily lucky to be given opportunity to be at some amazing events.
Mhm.
A few come to mind. I was in Salt Lake City, 2002, the Olympics. You weren't born yet, were you? It's going to make me feel old. Shoot. I was a reporter for TSN, and I was the Canadian men's and women's hockey teams both won gold.
Yeah.
And it was on US soil. They both had to beat the US to win gold. And it was Canada, the women had lost in 98. The men had lost as well, but the women had lost in 98 in a really tough situation out in where was Nagano. And this was sort of the redemption. And Canada hadn't won a gold in men's hockey, I believe, in 50 years leading up to that. That was really cool. When you can kind of be a little bit of you're still presenting it and you're still trying to be, you're doing it in a way that's, you're not trying to be too impartial or anything like that. But when you're covering the Olympics, you are allowed a little bit to wave the Canadian flag. I'm a very patriotic guy,
Yeah.
and I think it was just cool to be there and watching that team with those, so many superstars on that team, the Aginla and Sakic and Lindros and all these guys. And it was very cool to watch them and to watch the women with Cassie Campbell and Jennifer Botterill and Haley Wickenheiser kind of have their moment in the sun. It was really cool. So that would be one. There's a few others as well. I was at some pretty cool game sevens in the World Series.
Oh, very
The
nice.
following 9/11, the Yankees were in the World Series, a very dramatic moment. Game three at Yankee Stadium. This was the first big sporting event right after 9/11. And George Bush comes out, he throws out the ceremonial first pitch, and
We're at
everyone's
that.
going,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, this eagle comes and lands on his arm. And
Oh yeah.
there was just, yeah, you remember it. So
Oh,
like
yeah,
there
I've
was,
seen it.
yeah, and then that was game three, and then game seven, obviously Luis Gonzalez broken bat, and they win the championship. It was like a pretty cool moment. So, there was a lot of moments like that. I was really lucky. World Series, NBA championships, Grey Cups, Stanley Cup Finals. When the stakes are the highest, it's really cool to be there to experience it. But I would say if a long, very long answer, but I would say the Olympics, whether it was 2002 or 14 or 16. Those were moments I will never forget, and just super lucky to be a part of that. And these Canadian athletes, all the athletes, but the Canadian athletes that you get a chance to interact with, they put their heart and soul into this. And it's not for $1 million contracts, it's for the love of sport and for their country. And to see them achieve, even if they didn't end up on the podium, but they had personal bests and they just felt this level of love for what they were able to accomplish was pretty cool and pretty heartwarming. So to be there to sort of even just be a fly on the wall at the venues and talking with the athletes was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And yeah, thank you so much for giving me your time here. You've pretty much accomplished what myself and so many other people I know want in the future, just the opportunities you've gotten and how you've built yourself up. It's really cool to be able to talk to you. Funny story, last night I was sitting at a restaurant before my men's league game with my dad, and he's like, "Hey buddy, how's your podcast doing, by the way?" And I look up at the TV, it was around like 6:37. I'm like, right up there. You see that guy right there on the left? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I'm interviewing him tomorrow. He's like, no way, David Amber. I'm like, yeah. So, it's really
That's
cool.
funny.
It's really cool to be able to talk to you and hear your story.
My pleasure, and really good interview. And I wish you
Very
nothing but the
much.
best. I know you got a lot of bodies all striving. It's a great industry. It can be tough at times. There's going to be some rejection. There'll be some pain, I assure you.
Awesome.
But for people who are passionate about it and love it, it's a great career to have, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, guys, this concludes Rattling the Brain Season 2, Episode 4 with David Amber. David, thank you for your time, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, Aaron.